Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation of Unsettling Truths by authors Mark Charles and Soong Chang Ra. I'm Kyle Krumsick, and I am a youth pastor and an admin at the Anchor Church. Dave, if you want to raise your hand, this is David Arkorful, if I'm getting that correct. He's a part of the Methodist Church. And then we have Brandon as well, who is the youth pastor at OB1. Brandon, if you want to wave your hand, say hi. Perfect. There we go. So we chose the book Unsettling Truths, as I mentioned, by Mark Charles and Soong Chang Ra. And in this book, Charles and Ra bring to light the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery. And they do this by presenting the history of the doctrine of discovery and how it bled into the ideas of American exceptionalism and the idea of Christendom. It also talks about our nation's past with the doctrine of discovery and how it affects our society today, for both the native people and the white Americans who have trouble stepping into the realities and recognizing the realities of our nation's past. This book was published in November 5th, or on November 5th, 2019, so it's fairly new. However, since its publication, it has earned and maintained Amazon's #1 bestseller spot in the category of colonialism and post-colonialism. And this category is updated every hour, and it's based on sales. So it's pretty interesting. It's also published by InterVarsity Press, which is in Downers Grove, Illinois. A little bit about the authors is Reverend Soong Chang Ra is a professor of church growth and evangelism at North Park Theological Seminary in Chicago, where he and his family live. And he's also written other books, which are called, some of his famous ones are The Next Evangelism and Prophetic Lament. Ra is formerly the founding pastor of the Cambridge Community Fellowship Church, which is a multi-ethnic, urban ministry-focused church committed to living out the values of racial recognition and social justice in the urban context. And Soong Chang has also previously been a part of a church planting team in the Washington, D.C. area. And he's worked for a number of years with InterVarsity, especially in Boston, and more specifically at MIT. A little bit about Mark Charles is he is a Native American activist who is also running for president as an independent this year in the 2020 election. Mark Charles is a Navajo and Dutch American, or is of Navajo and Dutch American descent, and is a speaker, writer, and consultant on the complexities of American history, race, culture, and faith. He is the author of the blog Reflections from the Hogan, and was the Washington, D.C. correspondent and columnist, I can't even say that right, for Native News Online. He has served on boards of the Christian Community Development Association and the Christian Reformed Church of North America, and he and his family live in Washington, D.C. A couple of reasons why we all chose to read this book is for Brandon. The cover actually grabbed his attention by the uniqueness of the ships mixed in with the interesting title. For me, I'm actually a big fan of a TV show called Yellowstone, and my fiance and I both love that show, and through that have just gained a little bit of interest of Native Americans in our country. And I also grew up close to a reservation and had interaction with kids from the reservation in high school. So that also drew my interest towards this book. And David wanted to hear more about the doctrine of discovery and its influence on our society today. And that's one reason that the book he had an interest in this book. And so now I'm going to transition to David, who's going to begin talking about the one of the three major themes that are mentioned in this book. So David, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Gil, for the nice presentation. As you said, I mean, we all had interest in this particular book. And I, in particular, my interest is more about the doctrine of discovery. Okay, the doctrine of discovery actually is a series of 15th century Christian edicts, or we call it a series of doctrines decreed by the Roman Catholic popes that gave Christian European nation states and explorers the right to claim lands that they claim to have discovered without respect to the original inhabitants of the land. So any land that is not inhabited by white European Christians or not ruled by white European Christians, the explorers have every right, and the Christian nation states have every right to claim those land. It declared, I mean, the doctrine declared native territories. Actually, the doctrine declared natives, indigenous people of all these territories as barbarians and savages and less human. And actually there's one part of the doctrine that actually specifically indicates, and I quote, that the barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. So it's actually declares, and it takes me back to when I was studying the Roman Empire some years back. During those days, when Roman Empire was Roman Empire, every nation that was not part of Roman Empire or that has not been occupied by the Roman Empire was labeled as barbaric or barbarian nation. And I think this doctrine also picks that ideology from there. So during the Roman Empire, you are either a barbarian or a Roman. If you are under Roman occupation or if you are a Roman citizen, you are not barbarian. If you are outside the Roman Empire, no matter who you are a barbarian. Okay, so this ideology is very complex, I mean, the way I see it, because it also provided the religious and the ideological justification for the atrocities that was committed against the natives and the indigenous people of all the land that they occupied. In essence, this doctrine provided the needed coverage to invade and also to subdue non-Christian lands and then hold them as a revenue-producing colonies for the European powers. So it's a very powerful doctrine that did a lot of things. And some of them includes helping to justify slave trade, colonization, and Western imperialism and exploitation. Originally, it was granted to the Portuguese and the Spanish, and then later spread across all Christian Europe. It was the same doctrine that led Christopher Columbus to discover America. Even though there were people living on the land. So the authors of the book have this big question: how do you discover land that is already inhabited? And I think we should all think about it and make our own decisions on this and have our own answers to this question. How do you discover land that is already inhabited? And everybody will have everyone may have different perspective about this question. And I'm okay with that. So it is this same policy or doctrine that created the hierarchy that places white people above people of color. In other way, what I'm trying to say is the concept of race and whiteness actually originated from this doctrine. According to Charles and Rao, it was the same doctrine that was used to justify and to support the genocide of the Native American population of the Turtle Island, which is now the North America that we know. So, what impact has this doctrine in our society today? And that's very important. I think that is what really made me to select this book. I mean, this doctrine has had a profound influence in our society, especially the United States, starting from the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was built on the foundation of this doctrine. And in it, it referred to the natives as merciless Indian savages. The same doctrine has a strong influence on the foundation of the United States Constitution, which excludes Indians completely and counted African Americans as 3/5 of a person. That's very interesting. The stronger part of this book is this doctrine is that it created the foundation upon which the current structure and institutions and the organization of privilege hierarchy was created, which is actually dominated by whiteness. So it created and maintained the structure, institutions, and organizational privileges dominated by whiteness. The problem we see today is just a continuation of that societal structures and systems and institutions that upholds racial inequality, which continues to privilege whiteness and make it more difficult for people of other races and other ethnic groups to participate and strive in our society. It is the origin of all the evils of our society, including systemic racism, segregation, oppression, all of which were born out of this doctrine. This narrative have been reinforced over centuries through policies and education as well. This doctrine, which is a Christian doctrine, served as the national framework that justifies American white supremacy and ongoing injustices. And I came across an article, and I want to quote something from that article. This quotation was by a person by the name Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal was a French mathematician, philosopher, writer, and a Catholic theologian. And in 1670, he said this, and I quote, "Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction. And I think that holds very, very true when you read the unsettled truth. And at this point, I would like to ask my next colleague to continue with our presentation. Brendan, you are invited to continue.
Thank you, David. The second theme that is explored in this book is the idea of American exceptionalism. And this is tied directly to the doctrine of discovery that David just talked about, and it is later transformed into manifest destiny during the expansion of the United States. It's really interesting because you can see the evolution of thought of what it means to be a great nation from these various doctrines and ideas that have permeated throughout our nation's history. A big emphasis of American exceptionalism is that the victor writes the history. Because the US has never lost a major war, you know, when we think back, Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War I and II, we've never lost them. We have not had to reevaluate our position and what it means to be a nation. This means that when we look back into history, we often see the people on our side as being moral people and the other as being the antagonist. History is more complicated than that, and our view of us being exceptional clouds our present judgment of what we have done in the past. I think this is most evident. The author talks about how nuclear weapons are a heated debate within the global community, and how we would say that we wouldn't want a country like North Korea, for example, to have them because who knows what they could do with those weapons. However, no one is asking if the United States should be able to have them. And it's interesting because if we look back over the last 70 years, the United States is the only nation that has used nuclear weapons, and we've used them twice on civilian cities. And so it's interesting that we view other countries as not being deemed to have these weapons when we ourselves, because we view ourselves as just and good, that we are then able to have them, even though we are the only nation that has used these weapons. Basically, American exceptionalism paints the picture of our history as being right and just without acknowledging and discussing the troubled past that our nation has. Our third theme is the idea of Christendom and how tied this idea is into the American mythos. Because Christendom is linked with American exceptionalism and our view of the United States as being a Christian country. This has taken on the form of many ideas, and the Bible and scripture has been used to justify racism and white supremacy, and that Christianity has kind of fused itself with the American society. It's really interesting because this idea of Christendom, or like Christianity being an empire, is very counter to what Jesus has to say about what faith looks like and what it means to follow a nation. For example, the paradox of Christianity as empire is that sacrificial love is at the core of our faith, while the foundation of empires is to seek power and to expand. But with the combination of Christianity with the United States, those two are a lot more blurred, where it's not as distinct, where Jesus calls us to live out our faith in accordance to the godly kingdom, where our American faith leads us to live our faith in accordance to the American kingdom. The author has this really blatant quote that I love where it says, "Christendom is the prostitution of the church to empire that created a church culture of seeking power rather than relationships. Jesus laid down his life, but the empire must save its life. Jesus emptied himself, but the empire must protect itself." And God wants the church to be an ongoing extension of God's relationship with us. But when we merge Christianity with empire, we are unable to live out that calling.
Yeah, that's good.
So much, Brandon and David, for sharing those three themes of the book, which are the history of the doctrine of discovery, American exceptionalism, and Christendom. And one thing that a few things that this book has been showing us and allowing us to grow in our understanding of embracing God's mission in the context of our own ministries is it showed us how important it is to know the history of what happened, why it happened, the way it happened, and even if as we dig deeper into those questions, we find it hard to believe and difficult to continue in hearing the things that actually happened. But this book has showed us the importance of that, and this book has also showed us the importance of digging deeper in our understanding of the pain that the Native American people have faced, and how it has heavily impacted their nations and their tribes, not only back then, but even the last couple generations up to now. And for me personally, this book has led me to think about how my home church can do ministry in a setting where our context is we have a tribe and a reservation that is 12 miles east of our town, and this book has allowed me to just have the ideas of asking questions of why have we never reached out to them? Why have we never gone onto the reservation to fellowship and to grow with? And this book has caused me to ask the questions of like, what role now does the church have in pursuing them and showing them Christ's love? And because before this and before reading this book and learning about what Mark Charles is doing, who is a Native American and has also pastored as well, is I didn't know that Native Americans even had an interest in hearing about Christ or the gospel before reading this book. And but the questions this book has also allowed me to realize is how do we as the church do that without coming and projecting our white Christian way on them again? And because of what this book has showed us is the ideas that the church has had before doing that did not go so well for them. But how do we do that without bringing our white Christian ideas and views on them? And also this book has caused me in my current ministry context to wondering, what does reservation life look like? What are the struggles and the hardships of reservation life? And one of the questions as I begin to think about that is how and why are youth choosing not to leave home and not to leave the reservation, even though a lot of them have the opportunity to go to college, that the reservation will pay for their college, that most people in America don't have that opportunity. So questions like that, this book has allowed me to really think about those and think about what does ministry look like and what does reservation look like, and how do we as a church connect with that community. And another reason that this book is for me personally is allowing me to discern about my identity as a pastor in a ministry of the gospel of Jesus is it's allowed me to think about bringing awareness to the fact that Native American people are still here in the U.S. and are still very much alive. And I think a lot of times in our society, we don't think about them so much. They're kind of off on the reservation, so we leave them there. But in reality, they're all over us, all over of California, especially where most of us are from, where Point Loma is located. So it's allowed me just to bring awareness to, or have this desire to bring awareness to what they're going through and to what reservation life looks like, and that they are brothers and sisters of in a part of the body. And so for me, that's what this is stood out to me and what this book has allowed me to do. But thank you so much for watching our presentation, and